Hi folks, I'm Woody, welcome back to the shed. Many years ago I saw this little placard in the cockpit of an aircraft that had the reputation of being really easy to fly with no vices or tricks, but it clearly caught a lot of experienced people out. This was such good advice I've copied it, with a few variations, into every aircraft I've owned. What you're about to see is a good reason to read that little placard before every flight. This little production will look at one particular aspect of flying the SD1 Minisport, one that'll be, I hope, helpful in not making the mistake that I made. In the operator's manual, it gives some advice regarding wind limits. It says the maximum acceptable perpendicular component of wind for takeoff and landing is 5 meters per second, in brackets 10 knots. Now, if you fly the tri-gear version, this doesn't sound much. I have a tail wheel type, but the tri-gear handbook, so I may not have completely relevant information, but it's a good start. Many handbooks for many aircraft suggest that the crosswind limitation applies to the landing primarily, where too much drift is definitely a bad thing. At a speed of 60 knots and a 10 knot crosswind, a quick bit of dead reckoning gives a drift angle of about 10 degrees. This can be countered by either pointing into wind until just before touchdown, or flying with some interwind bank applied and landing with the upwind wheel first, or a combination of the two. This is more easily done with a tri-gear. The tail dragger requires a lot more finesse to do either of these, and certainly either of these well, but the proximity of the wingtip to the ground makes the low wing option quite tricky, and the slower the aircraft is flown, the greater the drift. So approaching a few knots faster than normal is recommended. In addition, because the flapper-on control surface limits the available roll authority, half flap, 7 degrees, is recommended to help directional control. All that's well understood and well respected for the landing phase. What I hadn't expected was how much it would affect a takeoff. This is an afternoon arrival at a farm strip. It sits on top of a hill, and on this particular day it had a little crosswind, enough to make a landing a challenge, but not excessive. 15 minutes later the wind had increased in strength. Now, it's clear that the wind has got up a bit, but the windsock can't be seen. It's on the reverse slope of the runway towards the threshold. A group decision on the takeoff plan is to use the shelter of the upwind trees to get airborne, but this will require an uphill start to the takeoff. So a slow start, but we should be okay. We should be well up to speed by the time we break through the tree line. As I taxi towards the end of the runway and over the crest of the hill, the windsock becomes visible. It's clearly getting quite gusty and probably at least 15 knots. I'm having a little bit of difficulty keeping straight as the tail is being pushed downwind. This should have been enough of a warning, but I ignored it. I go as far down the runway as I can, then turn uphill and accelerate immediately. As you can see, I've got takeoff flap 7 degrees selected. Watch what happens next. Whew, okay. Let's rewind and analyse all that. Clearly, that takeoff didn't happen quite as I'd planned. So, what was the plan? Here's the view recorded by Skydemon with my takeoff path quite clear. My thoughts were to expect that the usual takeoff swing to the right would be counteracted by the crosswind, so I pointed myself downwind a little. In fact, the shelter from the trees to the left was enough to kill the wind, so I was already travelling downwind a little at rotate. This occurs just as I clear the end of the tree line, and catch the full force of the crosswind. At this point I got full left stick against the wind. This is how full control deflection at 7 degrees of flap looks in the hangar. And this is what I've got here. Normally things should look a lot like this. So we've started the roll. This is slow motion so we can study the event more clearly. I'll stop talking now so you can read my thoughts, more or less as I had them at the time, but a lot quicker then. Okay, so all aeroplanes bite fools. This time I got away with just being gently nibbled, but I was inches away from the SD1's full set of teeth. The crosswind took control of the aircraft's track as soon as the friction of the runway disappeared. I was already tracking downwind even during the takeoff roll, and because I didn't have a nice long runway to look down, this wasn't very obvious till I crested the hill. I should have aborted the takeoff at that stage, but with a very good chance of a ground loop developing, I decided to continue. About the only thing I did right was to level the wings and lower the nose to get the energy to lift us over the fence, and then hold the nose down again to come back to the wind. I was, frankly, very lucky. Crosswind limits are there for a reason, and not just for landing. So, thanks for dropping by. Glad to be able to talk to you about it. See you again soon.